Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to the Signal Sitdown. We've got a special episode today for you with our good friend Congressman Ralph Norman. Before we get into that interview, however, I want to make something crystal clear to our audience. The Signal Sitdown will be leaning into our coverage of the 2026 midterm elections, primaries and all. We will continue to talk to as many candidates as possible on this show because the 2026 midterm elections have massive implications for the direction of the Republican Party, the direction of the Democrat Party, the Trump administration and its agenda, and most of all for you, the American people. Across the country, Americans continue to suffer from an affordability crisis in housing, healthcare, and everyday goods. American citizens are being killed on city streets and subways in a violent crime wave that no one wants to talk about. Everyone thinks we've left the New York City of the 70s and 80s in the rearview mirror, but you're kidding yourself if you think America couldn't return to that level of devastation. Look at the guy New York City just elected as its mayor. Immigration, legal and illegal, are drivers of both the affordability and crime crises, though that's apparently a verboten topic too. By having these interviews, we simply hope to inform you about the policies that these candidates have embraced to address these crises. While this show is good friends with Congressman Norman, nothing in this interview should be construed as an endorsement of his gubernatorial campaign in South Carolina. The Daily Signal is a nonprofit organization, and we do not endorse candidates. That goes for Congressman Norman's campaign or any campaign of any candidate, local, state, or federal, heading into the 2026 midterm elections. Any of Congressman Norman's opponents have an open invite to come on this show and talk about these issues. Any opponent of any candidate we talk to over the next year has that exact same invitation. Congressman Norman will be joining us remotely today, which we will not be making a habit of, but we thought this episode was particularly important not just because of the affordability crisis, but also because Norman was a major player in one of the strangest things I've ever seen transpire on the House floor. Those of you who watch this show and want your boss to come on or want to come on yourself, don't try asking me for a virtual interview. I want to look you in the eyes and have these conversations that people in Washington, D.C. aren't having, but millions of Americans across the country are. So with that said, we'll take you to the interview with Congressman Ralph Norman. Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview. Congressman Ralph Norman, welcome to the Signal Sitdown virtually.
Glad to be with you, Bradley. I always enjoy your podcast and being on your show.
Well, we're always happy to have you, sir. Before we get into the midterms and your current bid for governor in South Carolina, I want to start with what was probably one of the most interesting things that I've ever witnessed on the floor of the House of Representatives. And that was this entire fight over the Epstein files, over the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and a resolution that you brought up, a motion that you brought up to censure Stacey Plaskett, the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I just want you to tell this whole story, take as long as you need to, all the ins and all the outs, because it is one of the most bizarre things that I've ever seen in Congress.
Yeah, Bradley, it's bizarre and really it's so unfortunate. And let me just start from the beginning. I credit Andy Harris and Chip Roy and other members of our Freedom Caucus to come up with the censure resolution, which we all felt she needed to be censored. Now, here are the facts. Ms. Plaskett is a 11-year, I guess, veteran of being in Congress. She served for that long. She's an attorney. She should have, I guess, in her defense, come up with something credible as to why she did what she did. But what she did, Bradley, was during the Cohen hearings back in 2000, I guess it was 19, uh, the the left were trying to basically do anything they could to stop Donald Trump. It is a Trump derangement syndrome that is prevalent now on the left. But bottom line, what she did was during her questioning, and actually Chip Roy was was present and doing his had some things that he was saying, but when it came to her line of questioning to Mr. Cohen, she was getting an email of what questions to ask from Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Jeffrey Epstein, you got to remember, this is 2019. In 2018, he was a convicted pedophile. He abused young girls, and that was his record. At the time, she had taken money in 2019, campaign money, and during the 5 minutes that she had to question, he was telling her, was she chewing something, the fact she looked good, and who to ask Cohen about, which was a young lady who was was I guess a confidant or was in the room with President Trump and knew all about the ins and outs of the campaign. And bottom line, she wanted him discredited. She thought that Michael Cohen would reveal the name of the person who could do the most damage to the president. And the bizarre thing about this, I mean, that was the heart of the matter. She was getting information from a convicted pedophile and was getting money, and we just thought it ought to be a censure resolution. She's on the
Yeah. So, what was her response to this, really quick, before we get into the censure resolution? I mean, what was her response when this surfaced in the Epstein files that she had been corresponding with Jeffrey Epstein in 2019 during a House Oversight Committee hearing?
The only thing she said, Bradley, was in defense was the fact that she's a lawyer, and she got texts from took advice from a lot of different people, and the only I guess bizarre thing that she left out was the fact that he was a convicted pedophile. Secondly, she took all of her 5 minutes to ask the questions that the convicted pedophile told her to ask on who to ask Cohen to provide information for Michael Cohen to provide that would hurt President Trump.
And so this was so she was saying that Jeffrey Epstein was a constituent of hers, and you've been in this town for some time. I don't know, how many constituents do you allow to text you during congressional hearings and basically submit questions for you to ask different witnesses that are brought before the committees that you sit on?
I've been in Congress for 8 years now. I have never done that, nor will I do that.
Is it a common practice for other members?
If it is, I don't know about it. No, I mean, you're too busy listening. I mean, you only have 5 minutes. In a lot of cases, you have the one of the Democrats on the opposite side filibustering, trying to take all the time up, or you have, like, if Michael Cohen was being cross-examined, that he could delay the fight, run the clock out, basically. But that was a clear-cut violation, in my opinion. She sits on the Intel Committee. She gets information that other congressmen do not get. And so it's not like she's, just doesn't have sensitive information. And it's not like she doesn't know better. She's been there for 11 years.
So this is where the censure motion comes in, is trying to get her removed from positions like her seat on the House Intel, or the Intel
Exactly.
Committee, right? And this Intel committee, I mean, let's be very clear about this. What the Epstein Files Transparency Act does is it release all of the unclassified information regarding Jeffrey Epstein, except for protection of the victims and some narrowly tailored redactions that are temporary based on current investigations or based on current prosecutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But an increasingly the narrative that is gaining steam in this town is that Jeffrey Epstein had connections to intelligence. Whether that intelligence apparatus was Mossad or MI6 or KGB, that's still up for debate. It seems like one of those three options is a little bit more likely than the other two, but he was in orbits of individuals with all sorts of intelligence connections. I bring up those three intelligence agencies because those were the intel agencies that Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, was attached to at the time where Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are kind of developing this relationship. And so you have somebody who had a human trafficking network, essentially, to have people engage in pedophilic activity that could be connected to intelligence agencies and is texting, after already being a convicted pedophile, texting a member currently right now sitting on the Intelligence Committee, the House of Representatives, about what to ask people in front of the Oversight Committee in 2019. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. And he paid for it. He did. He gave in excess of $30,000 to her campaign at some point. And this is a party that has wanted. They sat on the Epstein files for 4 years under Biden. Crickets. You didn't get anything. It was President Trump who ultimately led the charge to get Jeffrey Epstein convicted. And here was a lady whose words, she had a word salad, and I told her that made no sense. She left out things that she thought would justify what she did. But in response later, she said she's moving forward. Moving forward from what? Now she should have, to sit on that sensitive of a committee and give a convicted pedophile information that I'm sure if he asked for, she would be in a position to give it if she did. I don't have any evidence of that, but the bottom line is she thought enough of him to take his emails. She thought enough of him to use the 5 minutes in her questioning to ask just his questions. And when I brought it before the House, we had an hour of debate. Jamie Raskin and Ms. Plaskett gave their word salad of why it was completely normal. But it just wasn't. And the fact she couldn't talk her way out of the fact that the emails were there for everybody to see in broad daylight, broad print, whatever you want to call it. So I was when the vote came down, I expected the Democrats not to vote for it, but to have my own party, you had three.
Yeah, you surprised a lot of people when this came out. I know a lot of people on Capitol Hill were aware that something was coming down the pike from you and other conservatives in the House looking to hold people accountable for their connections to Jeffrey Epstein. But this did catch some people by surprise. And in the end, this vote on this censure resolution, which we can talk about, the vote now and the kind of horse trading that went on, this vote fails 209 to 214. And you said Republicans voted against it.
You had 4 that didn't show up. You had 3 that voted present, and you had 3 that voted against it, Republicans. And if this is not a clear case of, and we referred it to in my censure resolution, it went to the ethics committee to get more details on it. But we had everything we needed, and for them to cut a deal, my own party is let's just say that's where the contempt for the Republicans comes from. And yeah, I mean, you don't, at least, as I told people afterward, English is my first language. If they had a problem with what I was doing, tell me ahead of time. And if they were going to pull the rug out from under our argument, tell me why. And I went up to one of them, and he couldn't explain it. And it was interesting. Right after they voted it down, they pulled Corey Mills. They had a censure resolution on that, and that went out. I mean, they pulled that. It later came up the next day, and I had talked to Corey before I did the censure resolution. He knew it was coming up, and I vote. Corey is the Democrats are just trying to make an example out of him, and he later had it referred to the ethics committee the next day. But all that being said, to not say anything about it, to vote against it, and to not show up, and to vote present, no, it's. I will address this with the caucus because the fact that if this happened to me, and it's more than just me, they would do this to other people quietly.
No, 100%. And this is the narrative that we get into when folks on the right talk about the Republican Party, specifically the Republican Party in Congress, as quote unquote controlled opposition from the left, right? Where the conservative position is just what the left was saying 10 or 15 years prior. And there's never any teeth, there's never any accountability for this march towards financial calamity with the national debt, towards this march towards, massive amounts of corruption in government. And that includes censure motions like this. Like, we'll see what the ethics committee comes out with respect to Corey Mills' case. But the fact stands is that the Republicans are in the majority right now. And you have the facts pretty well established. You just laid them all out with respect to Stacey Plaskett, the delegate from the Virgin Islands, and yet Republicans can't get their house in order and hold people accountable. And that's what you said, contempt, right? This is the contempt that people feel for the Republican Party. And that kind of brings us to the midterms in 2026 and your current bid for governor in South Carolina. I'm not surprised that so many members of the House are leaving on the Republican side, seeking state office, right? You have your friend Andy Biggs in Arizona running for governor there. You have Elise Stefanik running for governor in New York. You have Chip Roy running for Texas AG. You have a lot of solid conservatives all around the country leaving the House to go work at the state level, statewide elections to try to make change. I mean, what do you think is driving a lot of really solid conservatives out of Washington and back to their home states?
Well, in my case, and everybody would probably have a different answer. In my case, there are no conservatives running for governor of South Carolina. They just aren't. There are no candidates that would do what I will do as governor, to balance the books, to put South Carolina put it in a position to win when we don't have our infrastructure in place, we don't have our education in place, we don't have our, so many things, the basics that we just don't do. The other thing too, Bradley, Congress is irredeemable, in my opinion. You're going to have to change people. This is just a small example of what they will do. And I'm so tired of hearing Republicans campaign on conservatism, less government, less taxes, less regulations, and then vote totally opposite because they're part of the deep state. And I'm sorry, they are. They just they play along, to go along to get along. We're at 38 trillion and counting. Our interest is drowning this country. And if we don't have people to wake up and have the courage to say enough is enough, Mr. Lobbyist, no, you're not getting this money. We're going to, the trillion and a half that we saved in the reconciliation, that's what the Democrats were trying to claw back in the shutdown. Now, we've withstood that thanks to Donald Trump. And I tell you, if it had not been for President Trump, they would have folded. They would have cut a deal. And $1.5 trillion is a teardrop in the ocean to handling the debt crisis that is coming our way. I guess it's going to take, as Kevin Roberts said from Heritage, that we're going to have to wake up one morning and no one is buying our bonds. No one is buying our bonds. Then what are we going to do? It's going to be too late then. So the dead stop doesn't have to happen. But I'm convinced I can, instead of being a one of 435, I can be the spokesman, the CEO of South Carolina, and recruit good people to run against these turncoats who get elected under conservatism and then completely forget the Republican creed. They forget where they come from, and are adding to the problem. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I'm going to put people against them. I've already said months ago said we need to redraw Jim Clyburn's district. We've got 7 congressmen. He negates on every vote. He supports Jim Clyburn. I like him personally, but he supported a man in Joe Biden who was cognitively not there. He supported a man in Joe Biden who opened the border to let criminals across, to let children be abused. He supported that man. And I'm sorry, he needs to at least let the voters decide in a district that's drawn fairly, and let the voters decide. He's been there 31 years. So all in all, and if you ask different people from Jody Arrington to Chip, what Chip knows what he can do as the Attorney General, and Jody, I think, will end up at some point in making a difference. But my role is to put our state back on a firm financial footing and to recruit people who are true conservatives and who will do what they say.
You pointed out that you feel like you are the only conservative in this race in South Carolina. So let's kind of lay the groundwork for people who are unfamiliar. Right now, you have Nancy Mace running in South Carolina. You have Pamela Yvette, who's running in South Carolina. You have yourself. You have Alan Wilson, who is the state attorney general there. And you have Josh Kimbrell, who's a state senator in South Carolina. You said you feel like you're the only conservative in that batch. What, in your mind, sets your candidacy apart? What makes it truly conservative as opposed to these other?
Well, first of all, Nancy's Nancy. I think as I told her the other day, I feel sorry for her children with that kind of language and her antics, but it is what it is. Secondly, if you look at my record for 8 years, I've used every opportunity to advocate for what I campaigned on and voted that way. I've got a 98% conservative record, highest among anybody in my delegation in South Carolina. But even if you compare all the Republicans, I rank in the top 10 on conservatism because I believe in it. And to change the system, you can't be part of the system. And I don't owe anything to the elite powers that be. We have to make change. My opponents, look, the governor, the attorney general, and lieutenant governor have got to bully pulpit whenever they need it. In other words, they can call a press conference. Everything they're talking about, Alan's had 13 years. When has you ever heard him advocate for judicial reform or for putting priorities in place? Pamela Abbott, when have you ever heard her take a position on anything? My lieutenant governor will be a workhorse, not blowing bubbles to the crowd and kissing babies. That is what she's done. She's now saying she's going to do some transformative things, but she's had the opportunity for 8 years. She hadn't done it. Same thing with Alan Wilson. And Josh Kimbrell, I don't know that well, but I don't know what he's done in the Senate. I understand he's got a moderate record. All that being said, it's not time for milquetoast, lukewarm candidates. This country's got severe challenges. We've got a party now that the Democrat Party is openly supporting a Marxist socialist, as the President Trump says, a communist form of government. And we got a fight on our hands. And we've got to get candidates who's going to say, no, we're not doing that. It's never worked. America was built on Constitution. America recognizes there is a God. What they're advocating for, the type government, is a godless type of government that gives power to the few. And I'm going to fight it. I'm going to get candidates who will put their name on the line and have the courage and not change when they're elected to office, because they will get elected.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned something with respect to how Washington works and the One Big Beautiful Bill. The lobbyists are really mad that we saved $1.5 trillion, even though it's a drop in the bucket compared to our national debt. South Carolina has a unique lobbying apparatus, a unique lobbying problem. It feels like a lot of people in South Carolina are bought and paid for. Uh, for example, the base is angry at Lindsey Graham because they perceive him to be someone who gets a lot of money from lobbyists. Now, he has a massive war chest. Others have fallen down that same path of talking to special interests in Washington, D.C., courting and chasing that campaign money. And this is a very specific issue in your state. I know this from talking to you several times over the years. Tell us a little bit about South Carolina's campaign apparatus, because it's a deep red state. But as you said, sometimes the leaders don't seem to govern that conservatively. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
That
get this,
lobbying.
Bradley. We've had a supermajority in the House. We only had 36 Democrats and 86 Republicans. Senate the same way. Supermajority in the House and Senate. And for the last 10 years, we have expanded government over 100%. The corruption that is in Columbia, South Carolina, with finding, as an example, $1.2 billion at the end of last year, it just magically appeared surplus. And guess who spent it? Politicians. We've had a massive shift of convicted felons, criminals who are walking the streets. We are one of two states that the politicians, a lot of them are trial lawyers, through the Judicial Merit Selection Committee, pick judges. Now, how is that different than a Clemson or Carolina allowing them to pick their own referees? Virginia is the only other state that does it this way. The frivolous lawsuits are draining the South Carolina. All that to say is you can't be part of the system and change this, and it's going to take a lot of work. But I will use the veto. I will use the bully pulpit. I will use every means I know to get South Carolina back on a firm financial footing. The Constitution calls for a balanced budget every year. Basically, they're on the hook for $9 billion. So all that to say is it's easily doable. We elect, as governor, a CEO, basically, that runs all facets. And you appoint over 200 commissions. You are the spokesman for the state. And I will use it for the good of the state, and I will use it for change, and I will use it to not benefit the elite few who run it right now, nor will I let the lobbyists have the control like they have. And we're all going to have to do this. And Andy Biggs will do it, Byron will do it, and I will do it.
In your experience in Washington, I mean, how do lobbyists exert control over?
It's crony capitalism. What's happened, they not only do they advocate for their particular industry, they are active in recruiting candidates that they know they can control, and they know that can get the money to the different industries. Why do you think we had $800 hammers in the DOD? Why do you think the massive the fight we had over the shutdown was over letting illegals tap the war chest of the federal government through Medicaid? I mean, how does that make sense? It shouldn't even be an argument.
Yeah.
And how do you think that that the subsidies that the insurance companies are getting, or the carve outs, how do you think the electric car company got $7,500? All that's just the tip of the iceberg. But in South Carolina, I'm gonna call it out. In my state of the state, I'm gonna list everything I'm telling you. And once I do the in-depth analysis of every agency of government, I'm going to put the most egregious on the internet. And when I go to the different communities, I'm going to say, this is where we're going to cut. And this is where we're going to put it to things that will help South Carolina, our roads, our bridges, our education system, our safety. This is what we're going to do. And then let the people put the pressure on their particular representatives. And I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican. If you go against these base principles, you're going to get called out. And I'm sure I will have some other episodes of the Stacey Placid outcome where they pull the rug out from under me. But guess what? I'm not going anywhere, and we're going to do it.
So you mentioned corruption, and you mentioned going through and auditing exactly what the South Carolina government is doing, what's in South Carolina's budget. There has been a lot of talk about state level Doge efforts. Doge comes to South Carolina. I believe you are in support of that idea. How do you envision that working at the end of the day? What do you think could, is this going to be freeing up taxpayer dollars to go to other initiatives like infrastructure, as you mentioned, or is this going to be something that you want to return to the people in the form of a tax cut or in the form of, Trump has mentioned sending direct checks to the American people for tariff revenue? Would you send Doge savings back in the form of checks directly to South Carolina?
What's interesting is all the candidates in the race for governor of South Carolina are now calling for doing away with, lowering the tax rates. We're the highest in the Southeast. What they're not talking about is what are you going to cut? You can't cut the taxes and then keep your spending like it is. It's got to have priorities. I'm speaking to over 300 accountants as soon as I leave your podcast. And my message to them is help me do an in-depth study, call it Doge, call it whatever you want, to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it'll shock South Carolinians, as the Doge Commission did. Brad, and look what Elon Musk did when, you had walls being built in Libya. You had financing for the public broadcast systems, clearly left wing in NPR. You had things that have nothing to do with what's good for this country. And we're fighting a Democrat Party that's all in favor of that because they're socialist and Marxist, and as President Trump said, communist. And we got a battle on our hands, but it's not going to cure itself with lukewarm, milquetoast candidates. It's just not. And so that's where I'm excited to lend my voice as a CEO, as governor of South Carolina, to help change out Washington and to change out the corruption we've got in South Carolina, which is rampant.
So you are prioritizing making sure that state budget seems balanced, if I understand you correctly, where other candidates have been advocating for a complete and total going away of the state income tax. And that state income tax brings in about $6 billion a year. That makes up about 45% of the state's revenue. And you mentioned it, if you want to cut taxes, you got to cut spending too. We need to make sure that this budget stays balanced, that we don't, that's actually constitutionally required in the state of South Carolina. And yet some folks are advocating for a complete going away of the state income tax. I mean, how are you thinking about the state income tax issue as opposed
We're going to
to
look at, well, the big difference with me, I've got the backbone that when the special interests start calling, and they're going to call like they did when I became a congressman, you got to support this. We need this subsidy. And no, you don't. It's not a priority. And I've got the courage, the backbone to say no. And if they want to run a candidate against me, do it. I'm not moved by that. And we're going to have more people that are willing. The other candidates in this race they haven't done it. And I don't think they will because they've had the opportunity. My record at every level, at every group, has been the top conservative, one of the top 5 or 8 conservatives who have backed up my rhetoric with my votes. The others cannot say that. And that's where the difference comes. And I'll say this, in Arizona and in Florida, the CEO as governor, in South Carolina, we have 8 years. It won't be until 2034 that we have another election because the incumbent normally wins for governor. Now, we can't afford 8 years of feckless, no leadership, or go along to get along. And if we're going to let the lobbyists continue, um, not under my watch. And it starts with the money, identifying that. Then it starts with firm decisions that will stick and that will we the people will see where every dollar goes in a Norman administration. They just will.
One thing that surprises a lot of people when you talk about the state of South Carolina is that really since the COVID bounce back of the economy, to the extent that it has bounced back, South Carolina has ranked within the top 10 for GDP growth, economic growth, etc. And when you look at South Carolina's economy, a surprising amount of that GDP growth can be traced back to manufacturing, automotive manufacturing, aerospace manufacturing, manufacturing in machinery and in plastics. This is part of what President Trump has been pushing on the national level is we want to get the economy going again. And we also want to make sure that it's providing these stable, good jobs for working class Americans while making sure that those jobs are going towards industries that are ultimately going to sever our dependence on places like China, on adversaries abroad, even our allies abroad. We might like Great Britain, but we don't want to depend on them for crucial materials if it ever comes to a war, not against Great Britain, but against any foreign country. You want to be able to produce things here at home, and South Carolina seems to be doing a fairly good job at that. So first, what is the secret in South Carolina? What has South Carolina done well to make that happen? And the second question is, how do you plan on trying to make that better if you're elected governor?
Well, first of all, the reason South Carolina is in a prime position and has done well in attracting the BMWs, the Boeings, the Continentals, the Michelin tire companies, we've attracted the good companies. Now, the politicians have abdicated their responsibility for spending it in the wrong direction. But there's one state that I would compare South Carolina to that at one time had everything we have. They had the beaches, they had the pristine national forests, they had everything going for it. Beautiful cities. Under Ronald Reagan, California was a model, and people wanted to.
I knew you were going there. You can't help but bash my home state.
Well,
I know you.
Get this, Brad. I went to an airport. Where was I? In San Francisco. It's a cesspool for drugs, for homelessness, for tents, under liberal leadership, and that's why liberal leadership does not work. And so,
We'll talk about a fish out of water. You walking around San Francisco.
yeah, I'm kind of not. I'm not one of them. Let's just say that. But I'm not going to let the way I'm going to. I'm going to make South Carolina a business-oriented state. I'm going to make it a conservative state. Some of the best decisions I will make is negotiations for companies that bring value. I don't give away anything. I'm from the business arena. I mean, I've had 30 years of succeeding in a business that's pretty competitive, the real estate development world. None of the others can say that. They're not business people. And we will make South Carolina business friendly. But some of the best decisions I made in running our company is no. When these companies want you to give the farm under the guise of we'll create jobs, that's not going to work with me. They're going to have to, yes, create quality jobs, but they're going to have to be bring something else to the table before they get billions of money. And I'm not letting crony capitalism ruin us.
So you think that the story of the ruin of California is crony capitalism?
Correct. They put people in office. Name me a conservative member of the legislature in California that really is doesn't do what they say. You can't get elected because they put the money behind these candidates. Gavin Newsom is an embarrassment. He just is. What's ever worked with him? He's a hothouse plant that's never done an honest day's work in his life. I could pick people off the street who have run a business. I don't care what kind of business. They would do a better job than he's doing. He's shipwrecked the state, and that's what's so encouraging to me You look at those who are running for governorship, and we mentioned Andy Biggs, we mentioned Byron Donalds. They're going to be great governors. Ron DeSantis did a tremendous job, but it's going to take that kind of bold leadership, and I'm the only one that will do it and not just say it.
One of the other things that's going to be a big motivating factor, not just for your race, but for the entire 2026 midterms, is affordability and home ownership. That's the biggest concern in my generation for sure. And an increasing number of my generation feels like they won't be able to own a home. They'll never be able to own a home. The average age of the first time home buyer now in the United States is 40 years old. And just a few years ago, it was 33. Things have changed dramatically in terms of home ownership in this country. South Carolina right now is about 5 to 6% below the national average in terms of affordability and the cost of living. But housing costs in particular are rising. In January 2021 to 2024, housing costs increased in your home state by over 20%. And over the last decade, housing costs have increased 83.2%, and the average median household income has increased 41.2%. This is a problem. This is a concern for a lot of people in my generation who want to be able to own homes. And so, first, how would you tackle the housing affordability issue in your home state of South Carolina?
Well, so goes housing, so goes the economy. And the reason people ask me all the time, why is that? And I've built houses for a long time. You employ probably over 200 different trades, from the concrete that goes into the footings to the architect to the lawyer who closes the transaction. The way you get affordability back is you lower the basics, you lower the gas prices. You can get you incentivize the technical schools who teach home building, who teach welding, who teach the trades. It's hard to get anybody that if it's hot work, and building a house is hard, is very demanding and it's hot work. But it shouldn't be the way it is. And every young person ought to be able to afford a house, because what other tax write-off do you have? You can the regular income that the average South Carolinian has, you can write off every bit of interest. And it's not like the interest rates are, yes, we want them lower, but I was selling houses at 18% back in the early 80s. And it's not just housing, because look at the health care. Obamacare has been an abomination. It really has. It's been the unaffordable health care. We got to work, and I think we are. My next year in Congress will be working on presenting a plan that's centered on the patient, that is health savings accounts, that gets insurance companies out of it, and basically makes health insurance where they can afford it. It's unaffordable now. And I had in my conservative opportunities, we had a speaker who was telling about the doctor shortage, and he compared it to people are not going into medicine anymore. Well, we're going to have a drastic shortage. And he compared it. He said, what if you can have the nicest car, but if you can't get a mechanic to fix it, what good's a car? And the same thing with medicine. We're going to have one, come up with a plan that is affordable, that puts it back in the patient's hand, let them decide where they want to go. And it just goes with the housing. If you're not healthy, it kind of precludes a lot of other things. The housing issue will come down, and we're doing it with gas prices are lower. Lumber is going to come down. The tariffs are affecting it, but that's going to be a driving factor. And I think that in South Carolina, we're going to have we're the number one state for people coming in, the number one suitcase state, people coming from New York, California, Illinois, and we got so much to offer. But it's got to be controlled growth, and it's got to be affordable, and it's not affordable in so many areas. Farming, our food, the input costs that farmers have, in many cases, the price they're getting on the open market is less than what they have in it. That's not going to work either. So it's going to be a combined effort on a lot of fronts.
Yeah, it has to be a multi-pronged attack because you have the housing problem, as you said, the health problem, the healthcare issue, the general affordability of living, grocery prices, etc. And if you can't put food on the table, and if you don't have a roof over your head, and you don't have a doctor there if something goes wrong, chances are you're not going to be in a position, whether you're a state or a nation or a community or a family, to succeed, to grow that family, to have more children if you want to raise children in a safe and healthy environment. And that just seems like the big civilizational red flashing warning light going off, not only in your state, but across the country. If you don't have strong families, you don't have a strong country, period. End of story. Another thing that contributes to the affordability crisis in this country has obviously, even though the mainstream media tries to tell you that it has no impact whatsoever, is illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is, the Trump administration is working double time to shut the border. They've done so successfully. They're working double time to deport the 10, 20 million illegal immigrants that Biden let in either by the wave of a fake legal wand or just opened the floodgates and let them in. They're working on that overtime, and now they've entered North Carolina. They've headed to Charlotte. ICE operations there are trying to deport illegal immigrants. They have yet to announce any sort of major operation in your home state. But you guys also have problems with illegal immigration because of what the Biden administration did to the country over the last 4 years. Right now, you have nearly, 150,000 illegal immigrants in the state. Projections vary that it costs anywhere between $500 million to $1 billion to South Carolina taxpayers. Education usually makes up a quarter of that cost, and the tax receipts coming in, the left loves to say that illegal immigration, well, they pay their taxes and they pay for themselves. It's completely and totally not true, especially in the state of South Carolina. The tax receipts on undocumented or illegal immigrants, or whatever the politically correct term is now, is so incredibly minuscule. So how do you plan on tackling illegal immigration in the state of South Carolina? Even though you guys aren't a border state, it's still a problem. And two, what type of relationship would you have with the Trump administration in making sure that those who should not be in this country are put back in their countries of origin?
First of all, Bradley, President Trump hired the perfect person to control or to get the illegals out of this country in Tom Homan. He's spoken to our group several times. He's a committed warrior. And he's been fought at every level by the Socialist Democrat Party, the 6 or the 7 politicians that were said to defy what President Trump is trying to do with deporting, the illegals. Sure, there's some that get caught up. Sure, there's some that have good, hardworking people and that contribute. Bottom line, though, if you're illegal, you shouldn't be here. And President Trump, Christian Norman was right to offer the incentives to turn yourself in, to go back, and then come in the legal way. But what Biden did was, as you know, he opened the floodgates to anybody and everybody, including criminals. And I take a picture with me of the little Ukraine girl who, right before she was killed on the train in Charlotte, by a person who had multiple arrests, 40 arrests. He had 20-something felonies. It was a revolving door. But look at Laken Riley in Georgia, killed by an illegal. And part of the criminals, the crimes they're committing, we don't even know about. It's just the ones we are publicized. But no, he's doing it. We're paying for it 2 and 3 times because we flew him over here. I paid a visit to the border, and on my flight back to South Carolina, guess who was on the flight? Mostly illegals with a number and a card across the chain to their neck. And Biden thought the purpose was to create a ruling class who were going to vote for Democrats to keep him in office. and it's not working. And thank God President Trump has taken the lead on this. No, what I would do is welcome Tom Homan. I welcome him to take those out of the system, and he's looking for the criminals now. The press wants you to think that he's taking children out of classrooms. No, he's looking for violent criminals who committed crimes, who have a record, and he knows where they are. This isn't just a spontaneous shotgun approach. He's getting, in Charlotte alone, the first 2 days, he had over 130 criminals who had a record that they knew about that were being flown back. So I fully support that. Is it causing some delays in work? Yeah. People are scared to go out if they figure they're going to get, they're going to get hauled back. And for the most part, they're good, but the criminals have got to go, and there's no other way to do it, Bradley, than the way that Tom Homan is doing, and targeting areas, going in, and making sure that criminals aren't harming the innocent public like they've done in so many cases.
So last question for you as we head into midterm year 2026, top concern of Republicans, what should be top of mind of every Republican candidate hoping to get elected on the federal level or the state
Top
level?
concern is the affordability crisis in healthcare and in housing. The other top concern is having people. We will maintain control if we do what we say, and if we match our campaign rhetoric with good legislation. We come up with common sense plans, and we don't have what happened to me on a Censure resolution where we had our own party pulling the rug out for something that in the overall scheme of things was small, but then it wasn't so small. We've got to come into solutions that work for the country, and we've got to have more cuts. We've got to have another reconciliation bills that we could easily have $5 trillion, easily, and get on board with supporting that with our conservatives. Will it happen? We'll see.
Congressman Ralph Norman, thank you for coming on.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.